Welcome to the Deception Narrative Workshop. My lawyer pushed a solitary document towards me and uttered 5 words that flipped everything. She activated the falsehood provision. I looked at him, taken aback. For 11 years, I had believed I was married to a woman who cherished me. For 11 years, I constructed a life, a venture, a future that I assumed we both embraced. And in that instant, seated in a conference room with a view of downtown, I discovered that every single day of those 11 years had been a fabrication. However, allow me to take you back to how this began, and most significantly, how it concluded with her attorney's smile fading and my wife being led away from the courtroom in handcuffs. I encountered Catherine in 2012. At the time, I was 31, managing a flourishing commercial real estate development company that I had nurtured since departing from my father's domain. She was 28, serving as an executive assistant at a venture capital firm that resided within one of my buildings. She possessed a beauty that was captivating in its natural, alluring way. Her appearance didn't initially captivate me. Instead, it was her intellect that drew me in. She displayed genuine interest in my work by asking insightful questions. She possessed an impressive memory, recalling details from past conversations we'd had weeks prior. In a way I hadn't experienced before, she made me feel truly seen. Unbeknownst to me, she had studied me for months leading up to our first chance encounter in the lobby. Our relationship progressed swiftly. 8 months after our first coffee date, I proposed. She shed tears of joy. Her family warmly accepted me. Everything seemed fitting. Here's a notable aspect about my background as a developer with a wealthy heritage. You learn early on that prenuptial agreements aren't negotiable. My father had endured a bitter divorce when I was 12, and he made me swear I'd never marry without one. So 3 weeks before our wedding, I explained this to Catherine. She reacted better than I anticipated. "I'm not marrying you for your wealth," she asserted, grasping my hand firmly. "I'm marrying you because you're the only man who has ever made me feel like I truly matter." During that period, my lawyer, Bradley Whitmore, prepared the contract. It was detailed, encompassing infidelity clauses and asset protection within its typical structure. However, Bradley was meticulous to a fault, and he incorporated a provision in Section 14, Paragraph 3, the fraud clause, which would only become relevant after 11 years. The language of this clause stipulated that any intentional concealment of assets, income, or financial activities by either party would be considered material fraud. This would invalidate all spousal claims and impose upon the offending party the full responsibility for investigative and legal expenses. Catherine agreed to it without pause. As I watched her sign, I marveled at finding such a reasonable person. I had no idea that this was merely the opening move in a game of chess I was unaware I was participating in. Our marriage appeared normal for the first 7 years. In fact, it seemed quite happy. We purchased a suburban house, renovated it together, and traveled to Paris, Tokyo, Barcelona. My spouse never took on a job after our marriage, instead meticulously managing our household. Bills were always paid promptly, social engagements organized to perfection, and dinner parties that left my business associates impressed. I often worked late hours, yet she never uttered a single complaint. She claimed to understand. She expressed pride in what I was creating. We attempted to have children, but that did not come to pass. We mourned together, or so I believed at the time. Now I question if she felt some sense of relief. The transformation began around our 8th year, and it was initially subtle. My wife established new friendships I was excluded from. She joined a women's investment club. She started attending wellness retreats twice or thrice a year. I put my trust in her blindly. I had no reason not to. What I didn't realize was that my wife had rekindled an old acquaintance named Raymond Casalano. They'd known each other in college, it seemed. He now worked as a financial consultant, focusing on wealth restructuring. This is something I would eventually discover. Later discovered that Raymond and Catherine had been in a romantic relationship prior to my arrival. It was also learned that their relationship hadn't truly ended. The unraveling began with a seemingly trivial issue, a discrepancy regarding taxes. I have an accountant named Dominic Harwood who manages my business finances. Dominic is the type of person who notices when one digit is off in a 1,000-page spreadsheet. In January of year 11, he called me about a question that seemed insignificant at the time. "There's a recurring transfer from your household account," he said. "Monthly, approximately $2,300. It began around 2 years ago. Do you know what it's for?" I didn't. Our household expenses were managed through this account, and Catherine was responsible for it. Assuming it was something ordinary, like a charitable donation or a forgotten subscription service, I said I would ask her. However, the ensuing conversation did not go as planned. Over dinner that night, when I brought up the transfers, Catherine's expression briefly shifted. If not for my attentiveness, I might have overlooked it, a brief flicker of something chillier than usual behind her eyes before warmth resumed. "Oh, that's merely my health savings," she replied casually. "You know, for spa trips and vitamins, I think I may have mentioned it." She hadn't. The casualness of her response, the hint of rehearsed tone, unsettled me for the first time in our marriage. I reasoned with myself that I was being paranoid. I reminded myself that a decade plus of trust carried weight. However, I also requested Dominic to delve deeper. What Dominic uncovered took him 3 weeks to assemble. The $2,300 transfers weren't deposited into any health savings account. Instead, they were sent to an LLC named Cascade Financial Partners, headquartered in Delaware and using a Nevada address. The LLC had a single listed director, a woman named Evelyn Hartwell. Evelyn Hartwell wasn't real. Her social security number linked to a deceased woman from Ohio who passed away in 1987. In Dominic's office, I found myself staring at the paperwork while my reality split down the middle. "There's more," Dominic cautioned me. He revealed another set of documents next. The trail showed where the money ended up after it reached Cascade. It passed through 3 additional LLCs before landing in an account in the Cayman Islands. This account has received approximately $280,000 over the past 26 months, money that belonged to me, our family funds, diverted in small enough amounts to avoid scrutiny and channeled through shell companies to conceal its path. "Who manages the Cayman account?" I inquired, already knowing Catherine's name wouldn't appear on it. "A trust," Dominic clarified. "The trustee is Raymond Casalano." At that time, I didn't confront Catherine. I remained stationary in my home office, gazing at the framed wedding photo on my desk for hours, depicting both of us beaming, her hand placed on my chest. I struggled to align that image with the woman who had been embezzling from me for years. I recollected each conversation we'd shared, every time she professed her love for me, every night I believed myself fortunate. Then I contemplated my father's advice following his divorce. "Son, when someone deceives you, your feelings will crave a course of action, resist them. Plan, execute." Consequently, I acted accordingly. The subsequent morning, I contacted Philip Garrison, a divorce attorney renowned for managing high-value cases with discretion and accuracy. He was costly, thorough, and precisely what I required. Additionally, I engaged the services of a private investigator named Charlotte Webb. Charlotte had spent 15 years working on corporate fraud cases prior to becoming independent. She focused on pattern recognition, deciphering behaviors, links, and concealed associations. Over the subsequent 4 months, I accumulated proof while sustaining the appearance of my marriage. Charlotte's investigation disclosed the entirety of what I was confronting. Raymond Casalano wasn't merely Catherine's financial advisor. They had been romantically involved for 3 years in their 20s, ending acrimoniously when he was discovered embezzling from an employer. Catherine had testified on his behalf, asserting she was unaware of his actions. He barely escaped prison, but their relationship didn't cease. Cell phone records indicated that Catherine and Raymond had been communicating frequently since before our marriage. The interactions escalated dramatically after our wedding, and peaked even more following my signing the documents for a significant development deal that augmented my net worth considerably. I discovered something chilling as well, a set of emails between Catherine and Raymond, dating back 2 months preceding my meeting with Charlotte. In one message, Raymond mentioned, "The subject is secluded. Wealthy trust matters stemming from parental divorce-seeking stability, an ideal candidate, you're aware of the drill." Catherine replied, "I'm already working on it. This is the one. Give me 18 months and we'll be able to vanish." It appears they had been plotting this deception even before our first encounter. Consequently, their relationship, spanning 11 years of my life, had been a complex scam operation. However, they overstepped their bounds. The initial 18 months had expanded into 11 years, and they made blunders throughout the process. The gravest error was activating the fraud clause. Section 14, paragraph 3 was clear. It wasn't only about concealed assets. It encompassed any intentional masking of financial transactions. Each transaction Catherine authorized was a distinct breach of rules. What mattered most was the provision stating that if deceit was established, the culprit would lose all marital property rights and be obligated to cover full restitution, legal fees, and investigative expenses. Catherine, who had affixed her signature to this contract, either read it or asserted that she did. Her lawyer, Philip Brennan, not related to the future judge, entered the case with assurance. Catherine portrayed me as a workaholic who neglected her, placed business above family, and sought solace elsewhere emotionally. She demanded half of all marital assets, lifelong spousal support, and ownership of our home. Catherine initiated the divorce first, perhaps sensing an impending change, although she was unaware of my knowledge. At first, her filing omitted any details about her personal finances. I allowed her lawyer to present his arguments unchallenged during the initial 2 court hearings. He successfully constructed a story depicting me as a wealthy but neglectful spouse and her as a devoted yet lonely one. Subsequently, I submitted my counterargument. On the day of the disclosure hearing, I arrived early with Philip Garrison and a paralegal, carrying 4 boxes filled with documentation. Catherine was already present at the opposing table, accompanied by her attorney. She appeared poised and self-assured. Her hair was impeccably styled, her attire chosen to convey a victimized image without appearing vulnerable. She hadn't seen me in 3 weeks, as I had moved into a corporate apartment upon filing my response, and when our eyes met, I noticed a brief hint of apprehension. Perhaps my demeanor was more tranquil than she anticipated. Judge Theodore Brennan, a 72-year-old former prosecutor with extensive experience in white-collar cases, entered the room, prompting everyone to stand. The counsel for Catherine was first, arguing precision and intolerance for legal maneuvers, asserting that the defendant had requested an extended discovery period, deemed unnecessary and designed to prolong the process. The attorney insisted that their client only sought what they were entitled to. After 11 years of marriage to a man who interrupted, Judge Theodore Brennan was Mr. Brennan. Catherine's lawyer paused, as this wasn't typical for these hearings. The judge then addressed Philip, stating he had reviewed both sets of filings and wanted to discuss a point raised in the respondent's documents before delving into timelines. Catherine's attorney paused again, and the judge turned to Philip for clarification regarding a motion claiming material fraud under Section 14 of the prenuptial agreement, along with over 800 pages of supporting evidence. Philip stood ready to summarize. For the past 11 years, the defendant has deliberately funneled around $284,000 from joint funds into a network of shell companies, masking the money flow. This money eventually ended up in an offshore account belonging to Raymond Casolano, a close associate of the defendant with whom she had hidden a relationship prior to marriage. The defense's expression paled as I observed her. The defendant signed a prenuptial agreement that included a provision for fraud, argued Philip. This provision states that any intentional concealment of assets or financial activities renders all spousal claims invalid and makes the offending party fully liable. We assert that the defendant has breached this clause by committing demonstrated and sustained fraudulent actions. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Brennan turned to Catherine's lawyer. "Were you privy to your client's financial dealings during the filing of this petition?" inquired the lawyer, apparently taken aback. "Your Honor," the attorney replied, voice quivering, "I was assured by my client that all asset disclosures were accurate. However, I was not aware of these matters. I shall take a short break to thoroughly examine the documents provided by Mr. Garrison." The judge granted the request and conferred with Catherine in private for 45 minutes. Outside the conference room, I waited with Philip, listening to muffled voices from behind the walls, not understanding the words but sensing the tension. Catherine's attorney sounded worried and demanding, while Catherine's voice grew frantic upon their return. Her face was ashen, her demeanor altered drastically, her eyes bloodshot and tears streaming down her cheeks. Reconvened in court, Judge Brennan fixed his gaze on the opposing counsel, who stood slowly to address him. In this paraphrase, I have preserved the full meaning of the original text while using different words to express the ideas. The approximate length remains unchanged. In consideration of the submitted evidence, the plaintiff seeks postponement for thorough examination, was rejected by Judge Brennan bluntly. The defendant has provided proof of continuous financial deceit. The plaintiff has had sufficient time to expose these actions. "I'd like to hear your defense, Ms. Casolano." Catherine recoiled at the mention of her surname, a name she hadn't heard in over a decade. Brennan was underscoring his point. "Your Honor," she started, her voice quivering. "I can clarify. I have emails within this file," the judge pointed out, picking up a document from November 2011 preceding your encounter with the defendant. "In these emails, you and Mr. Raymond Casolano deliberated on exploiting the defendant for a prolonged financial scam. You described him as an ideal candidate. Is this your communication?" Catherine's counsel attempted to intervene. "Your Honor, it appears those emails were acquired." Acquired through legitimate legal procedures during the discovery phase, Philip stated calmly. We retrieved them directly from the email server provider. Catherine remained silent, her hands trembling, the tissue she clutched tearing. Mrs. Casalano, Judge Brennan said, I'm going to ask you one more time, are these your communications? I wish to speak with. Counsel, Catherine murmured, you will be allowed to do so shortly. At present, I am asking for a direct response. Did you compose these emails? A long silence followed, lasting what seemed like minutes. Yes, Catherine eventually replied, barely audible. What transpired next was immediate. Judge Brennan declared that Catherine had materially breached the fraud clause in our prenuptial agreement. This revoked all her claims to marital assets. He also ordered a financial accounting of diverted funds and ruled that she was responsible for full restitution, along with my legal and investigative expenses. He wasn't done yet. The documents presented in this court, he stated, detail not just civil deception but what seems to be criminal actions such as identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. I'm submitting this case to the district attorney's office for examination. Catherine started sobbing uncontrollably now, unlike the controlled tears she shed at her initial filing. Her lawyer requested a pause. The judge agreed. Upon their return, her lawyer spoke in a lifeless tone. Your Honor, considering the situation, the petitioner is withdrawing her divorce request. She is also open to discussing a structured settlement for restitution. That won't be required, Philip responded. The defendant will be filing for divorce and will pursue enforcement of all fraud provisions along with damages. Judge Brennan nodded in agreement. All right then, the case will progress accordingly. He looked at Catherine one last time. Ms. Catherine, I suggest you prepare yourself for the upcoming proceedings. 1. I advise you, Casalano, to secure a criminal defense attorney. The pace of the legal proceedings took me by surprise. Raymond Casalano was detained 2 weeks later in Miami, attempting to board a flight to Grand Cayman. Investigators were tipped off by his mother, Ruth, who traded immunity for her cooperation. Unbeknownst to her, Raymond had been using her identity to establish some shell companies. She was livid. Catherine was apprehended the following day, charged with wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and money laundering. Her bail was set at $500,000, a figure her family couldn't raise. The prosecution proposed a plea deal, 15 years reduced to 8 if she testified against Raymond and returned all recoverable funds. She accepted the offer, asking to speak during her sentencing hearing. I was present, seated in the rear row. I acknowledge what I did was wrong, she said, her voice monotonous and rehearsed. I concede my mistake in straying from the person I desired to be. I admit full accountability. The judge, distinct from the one handling our civil cases, remained impassive. Ms. Casalano, the evidence indicates you never lost your identity. Rather, you were always aware of who you were and your actions throughout. What you've lost is a gamble's consequence. She was penalized for 7 years, while Raymond received 12. The restitution process took longer than the criminal trial. Most of the misdirected funds had been depleted, spent on luxury travels, Raymond's unsuccessful investment ventures. However, an offshore account retained approximately $140,000, which was retrieved and returned to me. The civil verdict against Catherine compensated for the remainder, though recovering it would take years, if at all. I sold the house. I could no longer inhabit it as the development company flourished. It became my anchor, the one domain of my life where effort and outcome still corresponded predictably. My father phoned me a week after sentencing. He had kept tabs on the case, yet opted against involvement. You dealt with it admirably, he commented. More so than I did. It doesn't seem like a victory, I replied. It shouldn't, he responded, but it's preferable to defeat. Sometimes they ask me if I regret the marriage, 11 years spent on a foundation of deceit. Every memory from that period is tainted. The holidays, the meals, the supposedly genuine moments, all now feel questionable. Learning to trust my instincts was a valuable lesson. I could have easily disregarded the initial flicker of doubt when Catherine explained the financial transfers. Many would have. I also learned that proof is crucial. While emotions might be warranted, they don't hold weight in courtrooms, evidence does. Learn that some individuals are authentic as they seem, while others give such convincing performances you can't discern truth until observing the script they follow. Catherine remains incarcerated, due for release in 4 years if she continues good conduct. Uncertain about her post-release plans. Indifferent. Last year, Raymond had his parole hearing. It was denied. Few months ago, I dined at a downtown restaurant. A woman approached, around mid-30s, with a charming smile. I apologize for intruding, she said, but believe we met at the Carlton event last year, new to the city and spotted you. Paused, considering her, polished, self-assured, her approach casual yet strategic, responded, not likely. If true, disinterested, not even in conversation, especially not with her. After she departed, I ended up eating dinner on my own. Some lessons demand singular learning experiences. If you find yourself viewing this and sense something amiss regarding your partner, inconsistencies in finances, stories with loose ends, or unexplained disappearances, do not disregard it. Rely on your intuition, assemble your proof discreetly, and enlist the aid of someone who can help you discern the situation before engaging it. The one lying beside you at night could be precisely who you suspect. On the other hand, they might be biding their time until you look away, giving them the chance to complete what they started. My wife's attorney smiled unknowingly, but upon discovery, he understood that the prenuptial agreement, with its fraud clause she had activated, would haunt her thoughts for the next 7 years.